All right, let's talk about one of the biggest ideas out there. Something you've probably heard a million times. Being made in the image of God, the imago Dei. But we're going to look at it through a really fascinating lens today, one that might just flip the whole concept on its head. So let's just get right to it. For literally centuries, some of the smartest people around have been wrestling with this question. What is it exactly that makes us a reflection of God? Is it a skill we have, something we do, or is it just something we are? Now, the usual answers, the ones we all know, they tend to point to our amazing human abilities. You know the list. Our ability to think, our wild creativity, the fact that we're self-aware, or that we have this built-in sense of right and wrong. And look, those are all incredible things. But what if they're not actually the main point? What if the original Hebrew was pointing to something way more concrete? To figure this out, we've got to go back to the source. Right there, in the original Hebrew of Genesis, there's a clue that pretty much reframes the entire conversation. The word we're zeroing in on is Selem. In Genesis, God says, "Let us make mankind in our Selem," which we translate as image. Now, according to the amazing work of Old Testament scholar Dr. Carmen Imes, how this word is used everywhere else in the Bible, well, that's where things get really interesting. And here it is. This is the big twist. When you look at how Selem is used in the rest of the Old Testament, it's not talking about some abstract idea. It almost always refers to a physical idol, a statue carved out of wood or stone, designed to represent a god. Just let that sink in for a second. What does that actually mean? It means when God created us, he wasn't just sprinkling in some divine quality. He was creating his actual, physical representatives here on earth. We aren't just like an image. The text is saying we are the image. We're God's living, breathing, walking, talking idols. And once you get that, wow, so many other things suddenly start to click into place. So let's see where this leads us. First stop, the 10 Commandments. Because this new perspective doesn't just change one little definition, it actually solves a super old puzzle right at the heart of the whole thing. Have you ever read the first 2 commandments and kind of thought, that sounds a little repetitive? First, you shall have no other gods before me, and then you shall not make for yourself a carved image. I mean, it sounds like the same thing said twice, right? Don't worship fake gods and don't worship their statues. But what if it's not a repeat at all? This is where it all comes together. The first commandment is totally about our relationship with God. Worship him and only him. But the second one? It isn't a repeat. It's about our relationship with each other. If humans are God's living Selem, then carving a lifeless statue isn't just a bad idea. It's a profound insult to the living, breathing images he already made. This was also a massive statement in the ancient world. Scholars like Greg Boyd point out that the Genesis story was basically a theological throwdown against all the other creation stories from neighboring cultures. It's like God was declaring his supremacy, saying, "Oh, your gods need you to carve them little statues out of wood? That's cute. My idols are alive. My representatives are better than your actual gods." And this idea doesn't just hang out in the Old Testament, it flows directly into what Jesus taught, and it gives his most famous teaching this incredible new layer of meaning. So an expert in the law asks Jesus what's the number 1 rule, and he gives 2 answers. First, love the Lord your God. But then he adds this little connecting phrase that changes everything, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. That phrase, is like it, that's the whole key. You see what he's doing? He isn't just picking 2 nice ideas. He is perfectly summarizing the logic of those first 2 commandments we were just talking about. How do you love God? Well, first, you worship him directly. And the second way, which is just like the first, is by loving and honoring his living images, your neighbors. The 2 are fundamentally linked. Okay, this brings us to one last really important clarification. If being God's image is all about being his physical representative, then what about all that stuff we talked about at the beginning, like being creative? And this is where Dr. Imes makes this just brilliant distinction. The imago Dei, the image of God, is what we are. It's our status as his reps. But things like creativity, ruling, tending the garden, that's our vocation. That's the job we're given because we are his image bearers. This is so profound. It means your creativity, your intelligence, your ability to build stuff, none of that is what makes you the image of God. You do those things because you are already the image of God. Our status is the identity, our work is the result. And this grounds our dignity not in what we can accomplish, but simply in who we are, a status that belongs to every single human being. So we have to leave it here with this one massive thought. If this is true, if every single person you see, from your best friend to your worst enemy, is a living, breathing statue of God walking the earth, how does that change how we interact with them? How does that change how we see the whole world? Now that's something worth thinking about.